Hi, everybody. My name is Gola. Hi, everybody. My name is Gola, and I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is December 29th, 2018. I have a sponsor. Her name is Georgia B. She is aware she is my sponsor, which is important. That sponsor is current with everything that's going on in my life. That relationship started out of necessity. And I'll tell you that right now, that if you're new, you're probably hearing that question of, do you have a sponsor yet? When are you going to get a sponsor? You need to get a sponsor. I had those questions when I was new. And so I got a sponsor. I didn't anticipate it becoming the most important human relationship in my life, but that's just where we're at today. And I love that woman very much. I find that the longer I've stayed sober, the more there's still left to discover about myself and how I react to life naturally. And I find that the more I can get honest with her, the better I show up in every single relationship in my life. And I'm very grateful for her. I have a home group. It is the Pacific Group in Los Angeles, California, but don't hold it against me. Everyone gets sober their own way. Some of us are sicker, and I just happen to be one of those. Jeffrey, I want to thank you for asking me to be here today. And gosh, there's so many people that I love here and that I did not anticipate seeing, and I was going to call you out by name, but now there's just too many of you to do that. And I feel truly, truly blessed that, God, if I start crying now, we're all in trouble. But I feel really blessed that I get to be in the middle of something so big and so beautiful today. And that is something that I'm really, really aware of. And if you're new, I want to welcome you and let you know that this is all available to you. This may not feel like much looking out at this beautiful screen of squares of complete strangers. I've come to really appreciate it, and it's moved me clearly in a way that makes me cry, but we're not going to go there yet. I'll tell you this, where I'm at in my life today is a place where I feel very affirmed in the person that I am. Why that's relevant to my drinking is that in my experience, I never was. I was just never comfortable. And I'll let you know too that that's not the goal. We're not here. This isn't a self-help program, and nor is it a let's, do self-care and figure out ourselves. It's just not that. I feel very blessed that it's been a result of pursuing recovery through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous with a sponsor. I thought I could do it on my own at first, but I was politely told and, reminded now over the years that you can't fix a broken mind with a broken mind. And I really walked in here with a broken mind, and a whole lot of broken other things too. I've been taught to share with you in a general way what it was like, what happened, and what it's like today, what I try to be like today, where I fall short today, and how I keep trying today. What it was like for me is I was always weird. I'm still weird. I'm a little strange. I'm a lot more comfortable with that today as a result of AA. But I know that I just had these really big, big, uncomfortable emotions, and that's gross. And I just didn't know what to do with them. I grew up on the west side of Los Angeles. My parents are immigrants. I have a weird name. English is not my first language. My parents split when I was young. I grew up in a pretty affluent part of town to a family that was not that. I grew up, getting eviction notices on our apartment door. And there was just a lot of tension in my home life. There was a lot of fighting. And I felt like I had to grow up really quick. None of those things make me an alcoholic. I didn't really know, I wasn't cognizant of any of those things. I think that my big feelings predated my cognizance of those things. But once I became cognizant of them, I feel like I really pointed to them a lot and blamed them for why I felt the way I felt, and used them to justify why I drank the way I drank and why I behaved the way I behaved. What I did know is that there was alcohol present in my home life. And when alcohol was present, a family that was pretty stressed out had joviality and singing and music and togetherness. And I wanted that feeling. I don't know that I wanted to be drunk, but I became obsessed with whatever that feeling was and finding ways to experience it. And so I experienced versions of that, of, carefreeness in acting and singing and dancing and art. But around age 10, I started having suicidal ideation. And my mom, we don't know if she's one of us or not. It's not my job to diagnose her. But she certainly was a heavy drinker when I was growing up, and she would leave me alone quite a bit so that she could go out drinking. And I just remember it making me really sad around ages 11 and 12. And I'm not one that remembers my first drink. I think I tried drinking a bit before I experienced the effect produced by alcohol for the first time, and I just didn't care for the taste. So I never drank enough of it to experience the effect. That is until I was 14 years old and I had 9 shots of Bacardi rum. And for me, I always equate that to a spiritual experience. And I never want to over exaggerate that for you if you are new. I don't mean that I saw a white light. I don't mean that there was a burning bush. I don't mean that God cheered me on to take another shot of Bacardi. I love going off. One of the ways that spiritual experience is reframed in our appendix on spiritual experience in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous for people like me that don't want to talk to you about spirituality, that view spirituality as this mask for religion and something that you're trying to sell me. And I'm just a little too smart for that, don't you know? But one of the ways it's reframed is that a spiritual experience can be as simple as a profound alteration in your reaction to life. And that's what the effect produced by alcohol does for me, right? And I feel that after about 2 or 3 shots. What that feels like for me is that, taking these shots with this group of kids from Venice and wanting so badly to fit in and having that monologue going in my brain that's constantly asking if they think I'm funny, if they think I'm smart, if they think I'm pretty, if I'm holding my hands the right way, that finally goes quiet. And the effect produced by alcohol allows me this ability to be here now in the moment with you and to connect comfortably and to not care, just not care. And for someone who cares so painfully much about everything all of the time, I need that, right? And if that's all it did, if I felt that effect and I stopped drinking and I carried on, you'd have a different speaker today, maybe, or I wouldn't have to do a bunch of stuff that doesn't make sense to stay sober for a little over 5 years now. But the problem with me is that if 2 or 3 shots feel like that, what is 9 going to feel like? Let's take that experiment. And that's how my drinking started. And that's how my drinking continued. As soon as I realized what alcohol did for me, anytime it was available, I was a binge drinker. I was always pushing it past the limit. By the end of high school, I was an everyday drinker. I had alcohol poisoning at the age of 17. And when I got alcohol poisoning, my mom presented me this ultimatum of, either you get your act together or you can go live with your dad. And so for me, it sets off this pattern, right? Of anytime you put something between me and my ability to drink, which I desperately need, the choice is going to be really clear. I think you're really selfish for making me make that decision because you should know better. And more importantly, in this situation, I really justified it by how dare she, doesn't she know that this is the thing I need to fix the thing she broke inside of me? But it just looked different when I was 17. I didn't know better. And I moved out to my dad's. And by my early 20s, I was just drinking for blackout. And I don't know how to explain to you in any better way than by sitting here and saying, hi, my name is Gola and I'm an alcoholic, that, my drinking started to be here now in the moment with you and to connect comfortably, and then ended drinking to be as far away from here and as far away from you and as far away from now and as far away as from the consequences of my drinking as possible. And I'm so grateful that I have, that I know the nature of my disease today, right? Because for so long, I just thought I was crazy. God, I don't want to cry yet. At all, really. I don't want to cry at all. But if I start now, we're all in trouble. I've just been really raw lately. But I'm really grateful that I know the nature of my disease, because for so long I had all of this stuff in my head that just, questioned, like, why am I like this? Why do I make these promises to myself that I can't keep? Why am I having these stories recounted to me the next day of my behavior the night before, doing things that, like I said, I'd never do? Why do I have to keep apologizing for things I don't remember? Why can't I just maintain a relationship? Why can't I show up? Why? Why is my head so loud? And I'm so grateful that I know I'm not, irreparably broken. Sometimes I still fall back into that, to be honest, but evidence has proved otherwise over these 5 years. I'm not the person that realized that my drinking was perhaps an issue. It was, an ex of mine who saw the way that I was when I was drunk, and his way of controlling and managing my drinking is telling me, okay, we're going to go out. You're going to have 2 drinks tonight. And I'd say, okay, we're going to go out. I'm going to have 2 drinks tonight. And I'd really mean it when I made that promise, right? I didn't want to keep dealing with the consequences that were happening as a result of my drinking. But then what would happen is we would go out and I'd have that 2 drink allotment and I'd think, I was being so silly. Why did I ever make? I can handle one more drink. I'm going to have one more drink and I'll be fine. And so I'm slipping off to the bar and I'm taking shots behind his back, or his friends were slipping me drinks. And again, I'm drinking for absolute oblivion. My way of, I mean, I used to say controlling and managing my drinking, but really I think it's just the progression of my alcoholism. And it doesn't have to be everybody's story. It's just mine. But, eventually I grew a rather intimate relationship with an outside issue that, for our intents and purposes, I'll just call cocaine, because that's what it was. And what happened for me, as it does for people that choose that path, is that it accelerated my descent to bottom rather quickly. And I ended up in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous for the first time. And I came here and I did not identify as an alcoholic. I thought my problems were much bigger. I thought, it's the boyfriend and it's my mom and it's the drugs, because society tells me that drugs are bad, but it can't be alcohol. There's no way that I'm ever going to live a life without alcohol. I could concede to you easily, yes, of course drugs are an issue, right? And I'll just pause to say, if drugs aren't a part of your story, great. It's not a requirement to be a part of Alcoholics Anonymous. But if you're new and they are a part of your story, I hope that you stay. I hope that you stay long enough to do the 12 steps as outlined out of the big book with a sponsor to realize whether or not you identify with this disease. Because if you do, you're in really good luck. You're in a room full of people that have a really good solution for you. I wasn't willing to do any of that. I didn't want to read your book. I didn't want to call a stranger and ask for permission about my life, because I thought that's what sponsorship was. Did not want to hold your hand and sing Kumbaya. And I did not want to talk to you about God. I really didn't. I thought it was so great that worked for you. Real cute. Super great. Not for me. I'm a little too smart. And, I'd hear what people were talking about in meetings. And they'd say things about the consequences of their drinking, their lost jobs and their lost cars and their lost families. And I just didn't relate to any of that. My life still looked really good on paper. I had the car and the job and the boyfriend and the apartment. I couldn't tell you, right? I couldn't be honest to the degree and tell you that I can't get out of bed without taking something that affects me from the neck up. I can't get dressed. I can't take a shower. I'm staying up for days at a time. I'm not eating for a week at a time. But my life looks really good on paper. So I'm fine. Thank you so much. I'm fine. And that's another reason why today I'm super clear on the fact that there is no degree of material accomplishment, success, that's going to be the cure to my alcoholism either. For me, it has to come from something much greater that I just wasn't willing to accept into my life at that point. I get down a lot with the way that Dr. Bob is described to Bill the first time Bill goes to meet him. And in the book, it says that, being acutely aware that he was somehow abnormal, he did not yet know what it meant to be an alcoholic. That's me, man. Like I know there's something inside me that is rotten and awful. But this can't be it. I can have 2 drinks. You can't have 2 drinks. I'm so sorry. I can have just 2. I can say no to alcohol. I'm not an alcoholic. And in the week I leave AA, working step none and taking not one breath sober, I lose my job, I lose my apartment, I lose my relationship, and I attempt suicide for the first of a couple times to come before getting sober. But for me, I'm a seeker. I need to fix that thing that's broken inside me. And so I set out to figure out what that's going to be. I put the drugs down, but I don't put alcohol down. I'm just going to find the solution that will allow me to keep drinking. And so I go see a psychologist. I go see a psychiatrist. I try psychedelics because I hear they're really good for people with addiction. I leave Los Angeles because Los Angeles is the problem. I come back to Los Angeles for a different him because he's going to love me better and then I'll be okay. And none of that worked. None of that worked. I exhausted pretty much every last good idea. I've done the research and none of that worked. In the month prior to getting sober, I was living in between my car and my friends' couches. To be clear, not because I didn't have a place to go, but my parents made the ask of me that if I was to reside under their roof, I would be sober. And I just thought that was a bit harsh. And I decided that living in my Volkswagen Beetle convertible was freedom. And I was going to do that instead. And I had 48 cents in my bank account because I couldn't hold down a job without getting loaded through my shift. I weighed 93 pounds because I couldn't put anything in my body besides alcohol and drugs. And the cherry on top of it all was that having had a spiritual experience as a result of a psychotic break, I walked into a Floyd's barbershop at 10 p.m. one night and asked them to shave my head. So when I got here, newcomer, I was not a vision for you. I was unwell. The big thing that brought me back really was, at this point I could concede to you that maybe drinking had something to do with what a wreck my life was. And the best I could do at that point, having crossed an invisible line somewhere that I wasn't aware of crossing, was tell you that tomorrow was going to be a different day. And the problem with that kind of thinking, for those of you who've tried it, is that then tomorrow becomes today. And today I wake up and my head is screaming at me, and I need something to quiet that down, because there is no way I'm going to function in this world without a buffer. And it kind of, I go back and forth on this all the time. I'm sure it still worked physically, but it just wasn't quieting my brain. And I lived under the delusion that one day that would come back again if only I just kept seeking and seeking to the bottom of the bottle each day. I went to a bar one night trying to get a man to buy me a drink, and instead I met a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he's the same man who 12-stepped me on Christmas Day of 2018. It was a morning much like any other, where I was drunk and alone, house sitting for somebody that I met on a plane I got cut off from drinking on, because I guess that made me seem trustworthy enough to house sit for him. I don't know. And I was 2 bottles deep by 11 a.m. on Christmas Day, and I was calling people frantically to come take care of me, and I'd all but burned every bridge in my life, and everyone was tired of it, but they weren't tired enough to call the cops to come do a wellness check on me, so they did that instead. And the cops came over, and I was able to convince them I was just drunk and alone on Christmas. And they sat with me as we waited for a friend to come take legal responsibility of me, the problem. And the cops let me drink my wine and smoke my weed. And I was so excited that I had 2 new people to tell my sob story to. And, looking back, it's just that level of loneliness and desperation that only an alcoholic can feel. And, after the cops left, my friend came, she yelled at me, she left. And I called this man from AA and I told him what had happened. And he got so excited the way that we do. And he came over with his big book and he started reading to me from it. And with my very little knowledge of AA, wanted very little of what he was selling. And he asked me what I wanted. And I really thought that if someone just understood every detail and nuance of my life, that perhaps there'd be some freedom in that understanding. And so we set a timer for 20 minutes and I went off about why it was my mother's fault and my ex's fault and everyone else's fault. And if everyone would do things my way, we'd all be a lot better off. And the timer went off and he asked me if I felt better. And I said no. And so he set a timer for another 20 minutes. And at the end of that 40-minute breathless rant, that last good idea was gone. And I don't remember a whole lot else from that night. But one thing I always like to mention is that I was someone that was so distrusting of another human being, particularly men, as a result of situations I'd put myself in active alcoholism, that I asked him, why are you doing this? What's the ulterior motive here? Lay it on me. And he told me that helping me was part of his recovery. And if you're new, that's the foundation of what we do for each other in Alcoholics Anonymous. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help another alcoholic to achieve sobriety. If you're new, we want nothing from you. We want everything for you. And most of us are willing to do just about anything to allow you to experience a slice of what we've found here, provided that you're willing to take a few simple steps. And I find that in 5 short years, that's the asterisk that many cannot or will not do. But I hope that you give yourself a chance at, because it's a really good life on the other side. It took me a few more days to surrender. And what surrendering looked like for me was, waking up and having to reach for a bottle or a baggie or a pipe in order to shut my brain down, and not being able to shut it down, and being broken and desperate enough to talk to a ceiling, having no knowledge of prayer or no relationship with a higher power, saying that thing that you'll hear a lot in these rooms. This window of opportunity opened up for me, and I just said, please help me. I can't do this. And there's a little bit of me that wants to live. And there's a really throwaway line in Bill's story that I love so much. And it goes, there had been a humble willingness to have God with me, and he came. And I wasn't humble by virtue, right? I had humiliated myself into humility as a result of my active alcoholism, but it existed. And how God showed in my life then, without my consent really, was that these coincidences started to transpire that I had nothing to do with manufacturing other than asking for help. The first of those was that upon asking my dad to take me somewhere, I come from a family with no insurance and not enough money for one of these fancy treatment centers, but I wanted to just get a break from reality. It just so happens that my mom and dad had a friend that had a little problem with addiction, and my dad made it his, I don't know, his duty to make sure that that man didn't die. And that included going to Skid Row and bringing him back to my house when I was just a baby and letting him detox on our couch and waiting for his number to come up at Acton Rehab. And when it did, my mom drove him to rehab and I was 4 months old in the car. And 25 years later, when I was getting sober, that man owned a treatment center and he took me in for free. And it took a week of me being there dry and miserable to realize that simple physical separation from alcohol for an alcoholic like me actually doesn't fix anything. It makes things much worse because you take away my only buffer to reality, my only coping mechanism to this thing we call the human condition. And things get real bad. I thought I was losing my mind. So if you're new and it doesn't feel good, great. Like you're in the right place. What changed for me is that I found a sufficient substitute in Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't know that the first time I went to a meeting in treatment. I just was trying to get out of treatment for the night, but instead I walked into a meeting out of 3,000 meetings a week in Los Angeles. I walked into a meeting where there was a girl I'd known since I was 5 years old. And we used to drink together, and she had been sober since the last time I saw her in high school. And I knew she was a sick one. So I thought, if this worked for her, perhaps it'll work for me. And after that meeting, I was surrounded by the love of Alcoholics Anonymous women that told me to keep coming back and gave me their numbers. And I guess in my 8-month recess from AA, I forgot that you did that for everyone here. I just thought me with my shaved head and my sober living chic was very special. And you needed me for your meeting. And so I'll oblige. And so I followed them to another meeting where I heard the woman who's still my sponsor today speak. And I was given that thing that's available to us here, that gift of identification where someone well armed with the facts of their own alcoholism speaks. And I get to understand myself better. The pieces of me that I can't explain to you or articulate to you, the mess in my head that I don't have words for, I hear someone else say. She talked about how she drank and how she felt and how she thought and how she behaved and why she justified it and how she could stand there and say that she was living a God-filled life today. And why that appealed to me, I don't know. I just know that she had a sense of ease and comfort in her skin that I so desperately wanted for myself. And if you're new, I want you to know I have that today. And if I wasn't sober and if I didn't stay here and if I didn't work the 12 steps and feel the effect that is available through that, that wouldn't be the case. But I asked that woman to sponsor me. I started on a rigorous course of action, which included going to 7 meetings a week, sometimes more before I got a job. Not because that's where recovery is necessarily, but because the more I went, the more I accessed this strange feeling I've come to know as safety, the more I grew this beautiful community around me that really saved my life. The more I learned about myself, the more I found examples of what I want to be and sometimes what I don't want to be. But that's neither here nor there. I had commitments at those meetings that allowed me to be of service and get out of myself and put something in someone else before me and my own will and what I need for once in my life. And most importantly, I left treatment at 3 weeks sober because I was starting to build a foundation in Alcoholics Anonymous. Most importantly, I got started in my steps. I wasn't really down to I was a feral cat. So I didn't really want to make friends and hang out in a diner with strangers up until I had a little bit of time. So I got really deep into my steps really early on. And, that book that they give you, I don't know if someone went and rearranged all the words in my 8-month recess from AA, but I had an experience in it where I found myself in that book. I found God in that book and I found recovery in that book. And I'm not going to give you a step talk because I don't want you to fall asleep. But what I'll tell you is that just in doing the first step, I got to take a hard look at my relationship with alcohol and realize that it is extremely abnormal, that those lies that I told myself the first time I came to AA, that I can't have just 2, that I can say no. I've probably had just 2 a handful of times, never enjoyed it. I'm 5 years sober now. And the idea of being tipsy or buzzed without being able to fully send it makes me physically uncomfortable because I remember what it used to be like to get a little bit of that feeling and not be able to get any more alcohol. And my skin would crawl. And what I know that to be today as a result of these steps is the phenomenon of craving and how it manifests in me physically. I get a physical feeling of discomfort when I drink a little bit, but I can't go all the way. I'm not assuming it's the same for you, but that's just been my experience. And consequently, in avoiding that feeling, those have been the only times I've said no to alcohol. I thought that step 2 would be much harder for me. I really didn't want to do the God thing prior to asking Georgia to be my sponsor. I was trying to write God out of the steps in my little treatment center. But I had to just take a look at the coincidences that had transpired as a result of me asking for help. The things I had no power over once I had just kind of said, help me. And, to be quite honest with you, like I have some experience with steps 1 and 2 prior to getting sober, right? Like I always felt powerless to the world. I believed that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. I just thought that power was God, alcohol. And I put all of my faith in that beyond the point where it can stopped working. The only thing I did not have experience with was step 3. I had never given my will to anything. I had never turned my will over to anything. I knew that I had the best idea of what to do with my life. But I found that in taking direction from a sponsor and following in the footsteps of those ahead of me in Alcoholics Anonymous, I'd already turned my will over to AA. And I can tell you that that's where I started, but I can tell you that that's not where I am today. My relationship with God is something much bigger and something that's personal to me. And I hope that if you're new, you have at least some degree of open-mindedness and willingness, because the God that I talk about when I say that word God is not the God that I refused to believe in when I got here. It's not the God that arose feelings of antipathy in me when I was younger. It's not the God that you don't want to believe in or that you feel abandoned by or you feel unworthy of. It's a God that loves me against my will some days, whether I believe that I deserve it or not. I'm running out of time. So one of the things I'll tell you is that, I had a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps. What that means for me is that I've recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of body and mind. The alcohol problem has been removed from me. The obsession to drink, use, or harm myself has been removed. I did not know that I was going to reach a point in life where there wasn't still a little bit of me that was like, well, if this doesn't work out, I'll just kill myself. But at some point last year, that just went away. And I don't know that you promised me that, but that's just the case. Another thing for me that's been essential beyond the point of taking my steps is service. Service has been a complete cornerstone of my sobriety. And whether that started with commitments at meetings or driving people to meetings, it eventually stretched into sponsoring other women and taking them through the steps and watching the lights come on in their eyes and passing this thing forward, and being a part of general service, where I started as an alternate general service representative for a meeting, then got asked to be a committee chair at the area level for the cooperation with the Young Community Committee. And today I have the honor and privilege of serving as the chairperson of the Area 5 Southern California Assembly of Alcoholics Anonymous. So that means in the nonprofit corporate structure, I am CEO of the Southern California Area Assembly of Alcoholics Anonymous. My salary is $0 a year, but I'm a CEO, and I am a signer on a bank account for Alcoholics Anonymous, which, if you ask me, is just stupid, because I'm a person that chose to live in a car, right, to defend my drinking. I'm a person that couldn't level with you when you asked me what was wrong, when you told me there was something that was clearly wrong, because I just couldn't be honest with another human being. I work at the Midnight Mission today with my sponsor. It is a homeless shelter and homeless services nonprofit organization on Skid Row in downtown Los Angeles. And as my sponsor says, next to getting sober, that's the best thing that's happened to me in my life. But sometimes it also means that you're in the middle of a lot of tragedy and a lot of hardship, but we get to be a light, and we get to take everything that we learn here and that we have, we can readily access through AA to Skid Row every day. And, about a little over 2 months ago, I witnessed the aftermath of a friend of mine I met in general service and then took me to Young People's of AA, pull a knife on a police officer in a meth-fueled psychosis and be shot by the LAPD. And he is alive today. He is in jail today. I actually just got off the phone with him prior to this meeting. And, I don't know. I'm not here to place judgment on anyone else's program. That's clear to me, because each time I have, those fingers turn back in towards myself. But what I can tell you is that that man used to be in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous and something happened where he just wasn't anymore. And, the disease that we all have and that we all share got the best of him. And it took him to Twin Towers Correctional Facility. And, now he's hungry for this thing again. I hope so. But things got a little hard after that. I'm running out of time, but everything suddenly felt very unsafe. And I'm so grateful that once upon a time I said yes to the little things in Alcoholics Anonymous, like mopping the floor at my meeting or, setting up chairs or whatever, because it made it a lot easier down the line to say yes to the really big things. And sometimes, thank you, Jeffrey, I see that. Sometimes when life gets lifey, the really big things feel like just being able to get out of bed and show up and do what you're supposed to do. And it's been like that the last 2 months. I'm kind of coming out of that right now. But what I can tell you is amidst, losing friends to this disease that I thought I'd be trudging the road of happy destiny with for the rest of my life, never once has drinking felt like the solution. And for someone that used to just drink over every single thing, it's an absolute miracle. I'll end by saying this, is that you'll hear a lot of times in these rooms that you shouldn't quit before the miracle happens. But I'm a firm believer that we're always right in the middle of it. Now, that doesn't mean that I have the life beyond my wildest dreams. I mean, I really do feel like I do, because I didn't have any dreams when I got sober. But I don't mean that like I have, not had times of economic hardship or, confusion about where I was going to live or where my next meal was going to come from in sobriety. What I mean is that I've been placed in a position of safety. And, sometimes my miracle is not necessarily for me. Sometimes it just means I get to bear witness to these lives around me that completely transform as a result of this thing. And I'm so grateful that I'm awake to that. And I hope that you stay long enough and really give this thing a chance, because I guarantee you, I was a selfish person that could not be happy for anyone else. And in the midst of like these last few months that have been really challenging, I've seen so much goodness around me. I get to experience the full scope of the human experience today, and it doesn't scare me anymore. So if you're new, please stay. I can't promise you that you'll get everything you want, but I hope you get everything that you need. And sometimes that's even better. Thank you.